one might say.
Yeah, that's another word. We're older, Coach. It's all right.
In all seriousness, though, thanks for doing this.
Oh,
Appreciate it.
thanks for the invite. Yeah.
You're one of the people who, like, we'll get ready to go down to a conference, and like Avery will look at me and be like, "Hey, is Donnie going? If Donnie's going to be there?" And just because we enjoy seeing you, enjoy the conversation. So, in fact,
he has that effect.
What's that?
He has that effect.
Well, Avery's already got Avery wanted to do like a sub podcast just over Donnie's time at Colorado.
Right.
So if we get there, we get there. But since he grew up in the Denver area,
cool. That's
pretty much all he wants to talk about. But no. So I think there's an hour won't be enough time. There will definitely need to be a part 2. With hopefully this goes well and you're up for that. But I'm going to start with one of Avery's questions, which is he was scoping out your website, DonnieMaib.com.
Okay.
And you've got a picture of your ring case.
Yeah.
Which, right, speaks to a lot of things in one very quick photo, right? Success, longevity. But he asked a great question. Is there a story behind the case itself?
A little bit. I've had those. I'm not a big jewelry guy, first and foremost. I mean, I might have wore some in college a little bit, like I had a necklace or something. But then after that, I was like, I'm done with jewelry. And then you start coaching, and you don't ever know where any coach can tell you. You won't know where your career or path is going, and if you're going to be successful, good or not good. So I started collecting these rings, being at Texas, working with football. Every year it seems like we got a ring with football and Olympic sports, whether it's volleyball or golf, or tennis, men's tennis. They would give us these rings. And again, I would try on the ring, and then I would just throw it in this like dresser at home. And, as you get older, as you said earlier, as we're getting a little more seasoned, you move homes a couple times, and I'm like, I don't know what do you do with all these rings? I'm like, they're just kind of like just laying everywhere. And so my wife's like, we got to get a case for it. And so finally, I think the picture on the website, Skip, we literally just got that case probably a year or a few months before that picture was taken. And they were just strewn everywhere. There wasn't really a rhyme or reason. There were rings I didn't even realize I have because I just don't enjoy wearing jewelry. But so now I'm very happy that I have them in a home. But now I'm a little bit stressed because I don't want to leave that case anywhere, because you could just take all the rings at once.
You could give it to me. I'll take it.
Right. I'm sure you're collecting some yourself, the coaches. So
I'm chasing you.
Yeah, so that's the thing with the ring case, Skip. It was a little bit of a mostly my wife going, we got to organize these things because they were everywhere. So anyway,
I like the humbleness of I just got all these rings. I just don't know what to do with them. I have all these things that signify success, and
let's be honest.
Hey,
I don't even wear jewelry.
That's what the kids say. Goals, right? That's what they call #goals, right? Big time. We're excited to have you on here, Donnie. Like, for those of y'all who've been living under a rock or maybe not in this profession, Donnie's been doing this for a long time with a lot of success. D, you started doing this before I even knew what strength conditioning was. What drew you into the field over 2 decades ago?
I mean, I'm just going to be candid. Like, first of all, I blew my knee my senior year at Georgia. I played defensive line at Georgia, blew my ACL going into my senior year, which was devastating. Went into depression. Like, back then, our mental health program back then was literally like, dude, you better suck it up and get your butt in gear. And that was my mental health talk back then. And we didn't, depression was more taboo. So I struggled with my identity, went through depression, almost failed out of college. Finally kind of got my act together and realized my career was over. Finished out my career at Georgia, and I could not envision myself ever putting on a suit and tie and stepping foot in any kind of corporate office. And like, what am I going to do? And so the only thing that came to mind was coaching. And it's kind of that story of whatever you do in life, right? It's like, I think what's one of my favorite quotes, like the smallest keys open up the biggest doors. And so what had happened was I trained so hard in college and done it with such excellence and passion. This one coach told me one day, E.J. Dockeries, who passed away this past year, unfortunately, he says, "Hey, have you ever thought about coaching?" And I was like, "I don't want to, what? No, I'm not coaching. I'm playing football. I'm going to go to NFL. I'm going to make money." I just shrugged him off. When I blew my knee and tried to figure out, like, oh, man, I got to graduate and get a job, I started thinking about that conversation. He's like, "Hey, you would be good at this, I think." And so that's kind of what led me to the coaching career and field, was one small conversation randomly in a weight room in a hot summer day in summer of 1991 that didn't come to fruition until January of 1994. And that's kind of how long it took. So
did you find coaching to be like a healthy way to sort of transition, but yet hold on to that previous identity? Because like something you said really resonates with me. I blew my rotator cuff in college.
Right.
And identified as an athlete, like to the point where I said I was just majoring in baseball at school as opposed to actually anything academic. And just what you said sounds very similar. And then I found that when I first started coaching, like I sort of half acted like a player, half acted like a coach.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a little while to get out of that. Did you have any kind of similar experience in your transition?
Yeah, I would say my first 2 years as an intern at Colorado, I really struggled, like bad. So much so, I don't know if even Clint knows this, but I would call my dad on the weekends. I was 24, 25, would be in tears, hated it. And, just like, I don't know if I want to do this. And I would secretly go to Denver and different places and apply for jobs to try to get out of there. But just part of my deal was I wasn't relationally fitting in. I had a boss that was at the time was very demanding. We were working like 70, 80 hours a week. I couldn't even afford rent. And I lived in Broomfield, Colorado. I lived in a shoebox. You could literally you could use the potty, wash your hands, and grab something out of the fridge and cook an egg on the skillet, all within a matter of about a few feet. That's how small this place was. And I didn't even have a bed. I was sleeping on the floor, had an egg crate box for socks and underwear. And now I did have, coming out of college, I had a 15-inch woofer radio. That was like more important than like water and air back then. But I didn't have nothing to sleep on. And so my first 2 years of Colorado was really a struggle because, to your point, Skip, I was so used to everybody waiting on me and serving me. I had to change my kind of like approach in life and had to start serving other athletes. And it became more about their career and helping them than it was about me. And so there was a big maturation process that I had to go through. It was really painful. And but once I made that flip and finally started growing up and seeing the bigger picture, I started to flourish. But it took 2 years to. So I don't always agree that you're always going to like what you're doing at first. I think we all start out as novices and we're really not very good at what we do. And you've got to go through some those crucible moments, I call it, really intense seasons of your life where you got to mature, grow up, and kind of figure out kind of why you're doing your big why behind it. So that was a big thing. Just becoming a servant leader was kind of what was happening to me. Just learning my philosophy as a coach, which I live by today as Clint sees it. But so once I did that, man, I loved it, and it took off. So
nice.
For you to say you struggled relationally, like that's hard for me to see because like the Donnie I know is, I mean, you're all about relationships and you build them better than anyone I've met. So that's really interesting to hear, like the first 2 years. And you said like your philosophy kind of started to grow. What do you think? What was it that helped you kind of get over that hump in the first 2 years?
Well, I think more than anything, just really going back to being a kid, my dad had always taught me never to quit or give up. And so, and what I'm about to tell you is true. I literally one night was so frustrated with my boss and one of my coworkers at the time. I woke up, I could not sleep. I was like, I'm going to pack up my Bronco. I had a 1988 Bronco 2. And I was going to pack it up in the middle of the night and just leave and get the hell out of Boulder. And just, I'm done with this. This is not for me. This sucks. This is not what I signed up for. And I literally could not do it because I would have to face my dad, look him in the eye, and told him I quit. And so that's what kept me going. And that's the only reason I stayed in my job, because I did not want to have to face my dad and tell him that I just tossed in the keys and gave up. And so, that was a good time of testing for me, improving ground. And eventually, because I started standing, part of my problem too, Clint, was like I wasn't standing up for myself, like being an advocate. So I had to learn to like professionally kind of stand up to my boss and one of my coworkers and like set some boundaries. And then once I learned to do that, that's a skill, right? If you don't know how to do that, once I started learning to do some of that, I started getting a lot more respect from my peers and bosses. And then that's when I started realizing, okay, I can do this. And so that made a big difference.
I love that. So, I mean, you went through that. You said there was your dad. I'll be remiss if I didn't say you went through it with your beautiful wife, Miss Karen.
Right.
So you guys have been riding for a long time. How long have you been married, Coach?
26 years. We'll be 27 this May.
20. I mean, a lot of young coaches, obviously, but I'm recently engaged. A lot of coaches talk about how hard it is to have a work-life balance and how can I have a family and still be in the career and put in my hours in the room and make sure I'm doing everything that my teams need and my athletes need and my coaches need. How were you able to do it 26 years? You talk about living in a shoebox. How were you able to do that and then also maintain that relationship and be successful?
There's kind of two parts to this question. I think it goes back to my early years as a kid, and you start looking at how you were raised, right? And so I was raised in a very dysfunctional home. And I mean, I tell you, if we would have reality TV back then, I would be a millionaire now, because my home, there was screaming and shouting and punching walls and people like leaving and doing like crazy stuff, man. And I was one weekend, I went to stay with my mom, wouldn't go see my dad. He went to get the cops, bring me home. Like, it was wild, man, my childhood. And so I had lived, and so my point of telling you all that is kind of like, I grew up in a home of so much pain and just toxicity and dysfunction. I knew I did not want a family life like that. Like, there's no way that I ever want that. So whatever I need to do to have a healthier, more normal family life, I was going to, be committed to it. So with that being said, when I had to pick coaching, I had to pick either a sport coach or the weight room. And I'd seen our sport coaches, and when I was at Georgia, those guys never went home. And to your point, Clint, a lot of them had, infidelity, wives leave. They were, broken marriages, getting remarried, because they were always on the road working and never home. It's like I knew I did not want to be a sport coach because I would never see my wife or kids. But I knew strength coach, being a performance coach, right, I would have more say. At least I would have an off season to be home and see my wife and kids. And so that's why I chose that route. So that was one. And then secondly, going back to, the whole marriage thing. I mean, even today, like you've seen this recently, but I've put a lot of time and energy in being consistent on working on our marriage. I always say, if you don't work on your marriage won't work. And it's like we see all these coaches today that put all this time and energy into their career field, and they go home and they're exhausted. They got no energy for their marriage to invest in their relationship with their spouse, and they wonder why that relationship, is languishing. But if they would just take a fraction of that passion and energy and bring that to the house, right, and put that into their family and their marriage, it wouldn't be perfect, but it would be a lot healthier than it is now. So early on, my philosophy in parenting and marriage was I was going to make sure Karen and the kids were like integrated into my work. And there were times where she would come down to campus with the kids. We all go eat together, or be on the football field, or be in the weight room. And so maybe I couldn't always be home, but she could come up and be in my world. The kids could see what I do. And that's kind of how we made it through those really stressful, high demand times early in marriage with kids. That's kind of how we made it through.
I love that. Skip, you've been around it for a while too. What do you think stands out about that, what Donnie said, compared to like kind of what you've seen across the industry.
Well, it's interesting. Donnie alluded to something that he's alluded to this a couple of times, the idea of boundaries, right? The idea of understanding where you need to segment your energy, right? So you can actually have a more well-rounded, I would almost use the word holistic life, right? Mm-hmm. And what you often sometimes don't see are coaches who are willing to set those, right? And that can happen, it seems like, for a lot of reasons. And I wouldn't say that's just coaches, right? Yeah. I've seen plenty of people do it in the business space, in the startup space, sure, where they sometimes seem to want to reward themselves for working like 80 hours a week.
Yeah.
Right. But someone is suffering when you reward yourself that. So I'd be kind of curious to know, like, Donnie, you mentioned like bringing your family to the weight room or bringing them to campus. Are there other just like little things that you used to do, almost like techniques where you kind of allowed yourself the ability to put energy where you needed to, family or otherwise?
Yeah, I think the one thing I do still consistently to this day, I call my wife multiple times a day and check on her. And it's just, I think anytime you call your wife and let her know, you're just telling her, hey, I'm thinking about you and want to see how your day's going. So that would help me when I would get home after a stressful day. She would kind of know what was going on in my world, and I'd kind of have an idea of her. So we walk in the house at night, like we're not, not understanding where we are kind of at that moment. So I think that has helped. I think the other thing that's helped Karen and I over the years is just, we're pretty consistent. Like we do date nights, we spend time. And I think those date nights are, what's that one quote I've always heard? I've always liked, after every wedding comes a marriage, right? So like after you finally have your wedding, that's when the marriage actually starts, and you start becoming closer and more knowledgeable and aware of like your habits, dislikes, likes, things that kind of tick you off, things that maybe rub you the wrong way. And so I think when you have date nights like that, that gives you time to come in. And, some of our best conversations have been when Karen and I were younger in our marriage, and her mom ended up moving to Austin, and she would take the kids, and Karen and I would get out and go on a date, and we would just catch up and see how each other's doing. And we get into some intense conversations sometimes, but most of the time we just kind of catching up and connecting. And man, that did so much for our marriage early on, because you literally can get so busy as a coach, right? And as a stay-at-home mom, Karen was actually working and having kids, and like you just start to grow apart. Not all of a sudden now you're never around your wife, so you're not attracted to her. And over time that sets in, and then you end up maybe doing something you shouldn't be doing. And so you've really got to, as a man, you've got to keep kindling that romantic flame with your wife and keep pursuing her during those years where your time and your demands are super stressful. And it's very hard to do. It's very hard for sure.
I'm over here taking notes. Trying to get like you guys.
Well, that's where I was going to go. So you've obviously been in the weight room with Donnie and seeing how he handles things, right? Mm-hmm. So has that already trickled down to you and your life outside of work?
It's funny. I'll say this now, but I'm actually in a marriage class right now that Donnie's teaching. So I would say 100%. It's been pretty cool to like.
Pretty much an objective fact at that point.
Absolutely, but it's been pretty cool to be able to emulate, because like I said, if you don't see it super often, or if you do, like it's not really pronounced. Like he is very much a family man, but also a coach. So you get to see both sides, and he shines in both arenas, and it's definitely really cool for me to be like, hey, that is something I could do. Because when you're a younger coach, I got here when I was 25, and D Maib, he would tell me I was just grinding. I was in the room, in the room.
Add to that, Skip, is I think this is something that you'd have to ask each coach individually. I think there's some coaches that feel like their family life probably holds them back a little bit, Whereas I don't believe that at all. I believe my family makes me a better coach. It gives me better influence. It gives me a better example. I'm more patient. I'm more understanding. I'm more compassionate with people, because I'm dealing with a wife and kids that have real people problems too. So if I'm not living it at home and it's not at my house, why would I bring it and not live it at work? And I just don't believe you can compartmentalize your life where like I'm one person at work, one person at home.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you shouldn't have areas you don't share with people. There should be intimate areas you don't talk about and kind of keep to yourself. But there should be some continuity and integrity of the same person I am at home, right, and how I am at work. Should kind of have some overlap. One of my favorite definitions of success is this, right? To have the love, trust, admiration, respect of those closest to me. So I just don't want respect from my colleagues and peers. I want my wife and kids to look up to me and respect me because of the man, husband, and the mentor and father I am, how much they matter to me. I want that first. And then the other comes, if that the other comes, great. If not, then I'm okay with it. I don't have to have it. So
It's cool everything he's saying. Like we'll talk about this a little bit later, but obviously you worked in football for a long time, and one of your main focuses now is women's volleyball. And you watch Coach Donnie with women's volleyball, and it's so natural. And then you understand that Donnie's got 4 daughters at home, and it makes sense. So his home life definitely trickles into work, and you can see how well he works with those young ladies because that is his life. That's what he's done. So it's pretty cool to see that.
I bet.
D Maib, I'm gonna keep going back to it for a little bit. You got to bear with me.
yeah, you're good. You're good.
How long you been at UT?
This is my 24th year. I'll be 25 in January coming up.
I don't know a ton of coaches over 20 years in the field. Definitely don't know a ton of coaches who've been 20 plus at one school. Like what keeps you in the field? What keeps you at UT? Like what's that thing that keeps you moving?
You kind of heard me talk about this and you kind of see me do it now, but I really believe you get in a school like this. I mean, there's a lot of challenges at a big Power 5 school, a lot of problems, a lot of bureaucracy and politics. I think number one, when you get to a place like this, you've really got to get good at winning people over. And what I mean by that is you got to learn to like just earn their trust. It takes longer at a bigger school sometimes to earn that trust. So that just means you got to be really consistent in what you're doing. And I think as you kind of take time and earn that trust, then people buy into you as a person, and then they buy into kind of whatever system or whatever you're selling. So I think that's the big piece. Number one, just learning how to earn people's trust and have that emotional intelligence of how you're coming off to people. I think that's so important. And I think secondly, you've got to, this is kind of cliche, I know I'm going to say it, but you got to just keep finding ways to kind of reinvent yourself, right? Clint knows this. Any coaches listening, you can really get stuck in a rut at a college, You're not going to have your boss or supervisor or administrators come down and go, hey, this is the career path I see for you. You need to do this. You need to get out of the weight room. You need to take these classes. You need to go meet with this person. You need to think and think about your career this way. Nobody's going to do that with you. So you kind of got to hustle, right? And do it. I love that Jim Rohn quote that says, work harder on yourself than you do at your job. And man, that to me is like spot on if you want to make it at a school for any amount of time. You got to be creative and kind of like work on yourself and kind of reinvent yourself as the years go by. And it'll help you have some longevity for sure.
What's been one of the most kind of beneficial reinventions of yourself, would you say?
I mean, I think honestly, this is crazy what I'm about to say, but the hardest seasons of my life have produced like the greatest growth. And there's something about adversity and disappointment and discouragement that really makes you reflect on who am I? Like, why am I here? And what do I need to be doing next? And so 2007, I get promoted to top assistant for football. It did not go how it was planned. And I'm not going to get into the details of that, but went through a very hard situation with that and very discouraged and disappointed. For 2 weeks, I walked around in the weight room with my lips stuck out and my tail between my legs like a little, sad puppy. And finally, I was like, you know what? This isn't working. I feel terrible. I'm not doing a good job here. I need to either get over it or I need to get on with it. And so I decided, I made a choice. I was like, I'm going to take so many classes on leadership and management and learn to lead better that either they're going to promote me here one day to a director or I'm going to leave and somebody else will. I'll get so valuable that somebody will see my value and promote me. So that was 07. For the next 3 years, I consumed, like, took classes on campus here, went to seminars, read books, listened to podcasts. And 3 years later, I'd probably earned a couple different certificates in that here on campus and just got really good at it, became a passion. Lo and behold, 2010, didn't even see it coming. They created this new position for a director of Olympic sports. And who would you think they would recommend? They said, you've been training for this. You're the man we want. We want to offer you the job if you want it. If not, we'll open it up across the country. I didn't bat an eye. I said, I will take that position. And so I was kind of getting ready for a position that didn't even exist. So I think you've got to always think about, right? The position myth is in the 360-degree leader. John Maxwell says this, right? The position myth says, I'll be a leader once the position kind of shows up. That's a myth. No, you become the leader you want for the position that you'll have one day. And so that starts now. So you got to start thinking and preparing yourself and studying for the position you want now so that when it does show up, you're fully ready to take it. And so that's kind of what happened to me.
Were there, in that sort of period of study, you just mentioned one, but were there any other of the books or podcasts that you listened to that really substantially stood out, where if someone's listening to this, they sort of want a starter set that you would recommend to them?
Yeah, I think I always kind of share this one, but I think one of the best leadership books is a book called The Leadership Challenge by Kuz and Posner. I think I'm saying it right. The Leadership Challenge. It's a pretty large book, but it's like the Bible on leadership, dude. It's research based too. It's not like fluffy or frou-frou. He does a lot of research. They're very well known, very credible authors, and they've researched military stuff, corporate stuff, all kind of different types of businesses, and they break it down. I think there's 5 different principles in that book on just what it takes to be the best leader you can be, but it is worth every second of your time if you want to be a better leader, for sure.
In your bio, you also use the term servant leader, which is something that I end up saying a fair amount. How would you, for people who are listening, like, just define the idea of being a servant leader?
For me, it's like a picture, Skip, and you can see this in the business world too, in sports. So I always say, if you could picture a triangle, right? Like at the top, like the top-down leadership, the leaders at the top, and everybody's kind of like looking up the totem pole, right? Like, oh, our chief and commanders at the top, we're here for him, and everybody's serving him and his vision, and he's got all the perks, he's got all the privileges, he's got all the fun stuff, right? And then all the little servants below are like, we don't have that much influence and say. Whereas servant leaderships, you take that same triangle, just flip it upside down. And now you're the leader at the bottom. You have the least amount of perks and privileges. And you're pushing up. The people that are working with you or following, you're trying to help them get their career going, help them have better perks. You're fighting for their salaries, for their career. And so to me, it's just a mindset shift. Doesn't mean you don't have influence. I really believe that servant leaders have the most influence, right? You can always tell a top-down leader because they have to remind you, hey, I'm the boss. You need to follow me because whereas a servant leader serves you, the follower, and they're the boss because they're laying down their life so that you can have a good career. And so there's a lot more influence and there's more loyalty there because you have to earn it.
Makes total sense. Yeah, I often, for some reason, in researching leadership and trying to get a little bit better myself, I stumbled upon how wolf packs work.
Right.
And most people think of the leader of the pack being in the front, but the way wolves work, the alpha is actually at the back.
Right.
And then the people who lead are like the older wolves, the people who move more slowly, and it's almost counterintuitive to what people would think, and it actually matches up with
That's
flipping
cool.
the diagram.
I've never read that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you embody that, D. Like, I've been with you for a long time now. You guys go in his office, you'd see a plethora of knowledge, a lot of books. The guy reads all the time. But I mean, a lot of it is on leadership. So it's definitely been something that's been really cool for me to definitely learn from. He's been my number one mentor in that standpoint. Let's dive into the fun stuff. Let's talk about some fun stuff. All right. We talked about the trophy case. You got the rings. You got the bling. I still don't believe that you don't like the jewelry, because Georgia got the turnover chain. Y'all had to have that back in the day.
Right.
But like, you work with some phenomenal athletes. Obviously, you're part of that 05 championship with Mac Brown and VY. What are some of the best sports memories that kind of stick in mind for you?
How deep you want me to go on these?
Well, Avery's going to start texting me about Cordell Stewart and Rashawn Salam in a second. So as deep as you want to go.
Let's see. I'm trying to think of some funny ones here and some good ones. Well, one of my all-time favorite is this was 2008. 100%. We were in off season, 2008. We weren't into the football season. This was in the winter, so January, February, kind of 2008. This was when Colt McCoy was here. This story I'm going to tell you specifically is about a guy by the name of Brian Arakpo. If you've ever met Brian Arakpo, the guy's he's retired now, but back then he was a monster.
He's a dude.
Yeah, has a real deep voice too, and he's our starting defensive end. Ended up getting drafted. I think got drafted first, second round NFL. Played for the Titans for a long time. Anyway, this morning we had started our workout. It was kind of toward the end of the week. And if you've ever worked with football, like toward the end of the week, guys tend to go out and drink Thursday night. We call it Thirsty Thursday, right? And so these guys, we come in Friday morning, we check row at 6 a.m. So we check row, everybody's there. And we would start off, if somebody had missed something, a class or whatever, back then you would do up downs. And coach would just get your feet hot, spread it out, get your feet hot. I'm going to blow the whistle. We'll do up downs. And so we start doing up downs. So I'm just walking this kind of covered tent area. It's dark. It's 6 a.m. One of the defensive backs says, "Hey, there's a so-and-so and so-and-so is outside the tent hiding." So I go out on the tent, look outside, and there's two of our starting defensive backs have slipped out the back door, and they're skipping the up downs. So I didn't say nothing. I walk into the session, blow my whistle, interrupt my boss, and go, "Dog, so-and-so and so-and-so's outside the tent. They're not doing up downs." He just drops his head, points to the field, which just means we're going to the football field. We're about to do bear crawls, up, down. It's about to be punishment. So we start heading down to the field, and then Arakpo starts sounding off. He starts cussing. "Who was it? Tell me who it was. I'm going to, bleep, bleep, bleep." So the boys start chirping and throw him under the bus. And so it actually ends up being Ryan Palmer, who they're like best friends, one of the DBs. They start chirping. They're right in front of me. They get into a fight and start throwing blows. Arakpo hits him. He flies across the air, hits this wall as we're going to go down these steps. And the boys separate him. We get down on the field. We get in lines. And Arakpo, we're trying to get them all lined up. Arakpo comes out, stops us, the string staff, from talking, and is walking back and forth and goes, "I tell you what, any of you MFs got another problem, you step up right now." And he was walking back and forth and just yelled, like, if any of y'all step out of line again, I'm going to beat you, you know what. I walked to the other end of the football field. I wasn't staying near him. He was seriously that pissed. I've never seen a football team have that straight of lines, like it was like military. And I'm not, I promise you can go ask anybody on that team. We never had another problem in the offseason. That 2008, I think we lost to Texas Tech in the last seconds up there in Lubbock with the Michael Crabtree.
Oh, yeah.
And then we went and we beat Ohio State in the Fiesta Bowl, had a phenomenal year. But that story to this day is probably one of my favorite. That's leadership, wherein a player steps up, takes control of a team, but he can back it up too, man. That was just a joy of a season to work with those guys because guys were policing themselves. We had to do very little. It was fun.
Rathbone has spoken.
Right.
The first time I met Rack, I mean, his voice is so deep. It sounded like it was coming from Donnie's 15-inch subwoofer. Like, it is the deepest voice. It caught me so off guard. I was like, hey, Donnie, who's that? Who is that? And should I leave him alone?
Yeah, he's a great guy. But he's a
great guy.
You get him, if you flip his switch at him, though, he's not going to be fun to be around.
Great guy. I kind of want another one. You got another one? What's
Oh,
another
yeah.
one that stands out for you?
I don't know if I should tell this one, but we're going to launch out.
It probably means you definitely should tell it.
Yeah. So 2004, we played Michigan in the Rose Bowl. This is just the funny things about college football, right? If I say the name Vince Young, you know who this is. So 2004, Vince is a sophomore, and he's kind of starting to come into his own. And we had struggled for years. We'd had decent seasons, but this particular year, we finally got a breakthrough, and I think we lost to Oklahoma that year, like 12 or 13-0. We only had one loss. Ended up came from behind up in Lawrence, beat Kansas on like 3rd and 18. He gets a first down. Like, it's historic play. Anyway, we finally make this BCS selection at the time, the bowl championship series selection. We get selected to play Michigan in the Rose Bowl. Huge for Texas football, for Mac Brown. And we get up there, and we're there for like 9 or 10 days. And for every night, the strength staff, we would meet down in the lobby, and we would get a list of names to go check rooms for curfew. And if somebody it was literally, you just go knock on the door. As long as they show you their face, like, hey, you here? Okay, check the names, go to the next door. And then we would kind of rally back down in the foyer and turn in if anybody was missing. And so sure enough, I'm not kidding you, I think it was multiple nights. Guess who was not in their room at curfew? Vince Young. And it would literally, that paper would get like folded up, put in the pocket, and walk off. Like you didn't even say it. Like, did y'all just hear? We just said Vince Young is not in his room. And the paper would get folded up, put in the pocket, walk off. And if you watch that game, Vince Young went off. He wasn't in for curfew. He gets MVP of the Rose Bowl. But could you imagine if you didn't play him? We would not win that game.
No chance.
And so there's just a lot of those stories in college football that, these are just young men that are learning their way, that need guidance. And, sometimes dropping a huge punishment on them is not what they necessarily need, even though some people won't understand that. But I'll never forget that. Like, well, I'm glad Vince, we didn't kick him off the team and send him back to Austin.
Right.
So anyway.
Well, that probably feeds into like a little bit more serious of a thing where, like, reading a room and reading your athletes and understanding who needs what, right, to get better. This is definitely probably an art that you've been developing for 20 plus years. Yeah,
I mean, every kid, it's hard for people to probably grasp this. I mean, Clint gets it, and Skip, you've been around it. But these are like kids that are super young. A lot of them come from, especially in football, a lot of them come from, just rough upbringing. Not all of them, but some of them do. And so they don't have the life skills yet. So a big part of our role as coaches is to mentor and teach these guys how to be men. And that's the part I love about my job, is like, it's bigger than the ball, right? And so a lot of what I've done over the years is just, I had a conversation with one of my athletes during a workout just this week about, dating and how you should go about that and make better decisions. And, and they listen, whether you think they do or not. They may not always do what you say, but they're listening, and I just feel like that quote on mentoring, right? Kids today, they don't need a sage on the stage. They need a guide on the side. So one of my favorite things, a book I just read recently was called I'm blanking on the name. It's something about, it'll come to me in a minute, but the guy's name is Donald Miller. And it's a book about being a hero. And he talks about there's 4 roles in any kind of narrative, right? Any kind of book. There's the hero, right? There's the villain, there's the victim, and there's the guide. And if you watch any movie, right? Those are the 4 roles. There's the hero, right? There's the victim, there's the villain, and the guide. And if you're going to live your life with purpose as a coach or whoever, you've got to live this narrative out in your life. It's not a movie, but there's got to be like what's going to happen in your life that's exciting. And so I find myself a lot of times, I'm not the hero in a lot of people's stories, but guess who I am? I'm the guide.
God.
And you go watch the movies. You go back to what's a famous one? Iron Man. Who's the guide in that movie? Right? Could probably be Pepper, maybe even Jarvis a little bit.
I'll take Pepper. I'll take Pepper.
He's got a guide, right? That's guiding him and help make decisions. So a lot of times as coaches, maybe I'm not the hero, I'm not the victim or the villain, but I'm teaching our athletes how to what? Become the hero in their own story. And to not be, because here's what athletes will play. They'll play the victim. Because every athlete's going to have a villain. So how do you teach your athlete to become the hero in their own story? You got to have a guide. And so that's the role I play a lot.
That's the quote coming from this one. That was nice. I like that you dropped that.
Yeah, it's
that was really good. That was really good.
Be the Yoda.
I don't know if I'm Yoda, but I don't know my hair.
Well,
my hair's getting there. Like we got the silver fox, you and I do.
I got like 4 or 5. You'll see them coming in. I got a little, trying to get my little salt and pepper on. I mean, you talk about helping the athletes be the hero in their own story. It's crazy. I'm building like my guest list for the wedding and things like that, and I've got a couple former athletes that are on my guest list, and I'm like, wow, that means you've really had an impact on my life. Donnie, you worked with a lot of athletes. Like, who are some of those athletes that really impacted your life?
Oh, let's see. I have to think. I mean, everything from, even working like you think through like men's golf, David Gossett, who he's not pro anymore. He was a pro golfer for a while. Guys like him that were super dedicated, passionate about what they do. Probably football wise, different guys I've worked with over the years, like a Tim Crowder. Trying to think who else. Some of the DBs like Brandon Foster, Colt McCoy. Definitely, I've worked very close with Colt, and he had a tremendous impact on my life, not just as an athlete, but as some camaraderie of just how he carries himself in the locker room. To, for my volleyball team, a girl by the name of Amy Neal. She's married now and just had her first child, but she's a 5'9" outside hitter that played like she was 7'2". Played with passion and just grit and savviness, but wasn't always like that. To some of my tennis guys, to like a Lloyd Glasspool, who's being very successful over in doubles right now, that you see him battle through all the injuries and hardships he had here at Texas to how successful he is now. I think athletes over the years like that have just had an impact more on how I think they've challenged, who I am as a coach, and you kind of butt heads with them a little bit through those seasons. And then you kind of help them find their way. And then you look back and there's an appreciation that they give you and respect that you've earned that just makes it worth it. I think at the end of the day, we're all searching for significance, right? And so to me, the impact and influence you have in your athletes' lives, and then the memories that you have with them kind of create that significance in your life of how you've given back and they've helped you too become a better coach. I think it's a win-win situation. So
I love that. What would you say, we talked about coaching, what would you say the biggest life lesson you've learned from being a coach has been, whether that was from an athlete or just being in the career? What would you say the biggest life lesson is? I know you talked about your dad telling you never to quit or give up. Is that it, or do you think there's something deeper there?
No, I think at the end of the day, if I could sum it up in this one thing, is you've got to really learn how to value people. And then what I mean by that is the janitor to the president. Every person that works in this building has significance, they have value. And I feel like though you may have different relationships with different people in different roles, whether it's the walk-on that's paying their own way through school, or if it's the Heisman Trophy winner like a Ricky Williams, right? That we all have value. And I think the way you carry yourself, interact, and treat those individuals says a lot about you, your personhood, the character as a coach. And so the more I do this, the more it's so important for people to understand and feel, and I think they need to feel that you genuinely care, respect, and value them as a person and what they do for this organization and university. I think that's so important.
Would you say that's your why?
Yeah, because I think the Eleanor Roosevelt quote, I may botch this, but like, people may forget what you did for them, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. Right. And so, man, I want people to feel like after they work with me, like, number one, they go, man, you know what? He was not always cool and he was hard on me at times, but man, he made me feel good about myself. He made me feel good about the job I was doing at UT. And he made me feel good about myself as a person, my self-esteem, that I could go out and conquer the world. And so I would say that's probably my big why, just to value people and show them how important they are in this world and to help them achieve their goals. So,
how long have you two worked together now?
This is season 8.
Which that's nuts to me.
That's crazy. Yeah, this is season 8.
Do you remember interviewing a young Clint Martin and
oh yeah,
what your kind of initial reaction was to that first conversation?
Here we go.
Yeah, I think so. You know, it wasn't like, he may not remember all this, but it wasn't like his knowledge of what he knew about strength conditioning. It wasn't about, how well spoken he was, which he was, but he was so genuine and he was present on his interview. And the thing that jumped out the most to me, like, we got to get this dude here. He had such high level social skills that all the other candidates, there were candidates that had I'd say at the time we had one guy had way better, more experienced resume than he did. Mm-hmm. But Clint's ability to come into a situation and just dialogue and make you feel at ease and not be nervous or uptight, and to bring the level of tension down, I was like, dude, this is not normal. This ain't a normal cat. And so that was kind of what, like, this dude we need to get this guy here, man. I don't know what kind of juju he's got, but we need to bring that to Texas.
Appreciate
Clint,
it.
what do you remember about having to get ready to talk to Donnie? Because I know you did your homework, right? So
yeah, I did my homework.
Going in.
I did my homework, and we'd met. It actually all stemmed from, I came to one of their conferences down here. I came to one of their clinics just to learn, and I knew somebody else on staff, and we kind of hit it off, like, not even talking about X's and O's, just kind of just relationally, we kind of hit it off. But I remember I was a little intimidated when I came down. Like, I was coming from the hoops world. I was men's hoops, but I remember I was 25. I was already at my second men's basketball program, kind of on the rise, if you would say. And I was like, man, I got to get somewhere where I can really learn. I can't be 25 and feel like, I kind of felt untouchable, and I didn't like that at 25. And I was like, I need to get somewhere where I can really get among some really good people and just continue to grow. So that was the first thing that I wanted to come down and be here. But I remember getting into that room, that interview room, and it was all the coaches. It was my second or third interview of the day. I think there were 8 or 9. Pretty intense. But I remember after 5 minutes, because everybody's kind of cross-armed looking at you. And after 5 minutes, I remember everyone's kind of sitting back, relaxed, laughing. I think that's kind of what Donnie was talking about. They just really welcomed me. That was the pretty cool thing. It just felt really natural right away. And I think it was just kind of been a really good fit.
Well, that seems clear. So, like, we talked about, like, Donnie being at one school for a while, but it's also the case that, like, 8 years is a long time for staff members to be together.
For sure.
Like, particularly now, it seems like, I hate the term turnover, but, like, people move in and out pretty rapidly anymore. And it makes like being people centric more difficult because you're constantly having to recreate another nice relationship and that kind of thing. So kudos to you two, not to write you a Hallmark card, but kudos to you two for
I think it's pretty cool. It's
that.
kind of a testament to Donnie. But I mean, we do a lot of staff development and we talk to a lot of other staffs around the country, especially with the transition to the SEC. But our staff's been together for 4 years. Like our youngest guy or our newest guy has been here for 4 years. That you just don't really find that anymore. And it's pretty cool. Like there's 2 other people in our office that have been here longer than I have with Donnie. So I mean, you've got a 10-year, 9-year, and 8-year. Like that just doesn't really happen. And I think it's really cool. Even like across the campus, you don't really see that. So I think it's just something that's pretty unique. But definitely is fostering good relationships and fostering success.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's pretty clear. I think if we go back and listen to this, like there's an underlying theme that hasn't been spoken, which is you both keep working at the things that are important to you, right? Mm-hmm. So like acknowledging, reinventing yourself. Well, what does that take? Well, a deep dive on leadership for what you say 3 years, where putting effort into consuming books, getting better, putting effort into making sure that you're spending that energy at home as well as in the weight room. Like, I mean, there's sort of a cliche of trust the process, right? But it's not just trusting the process. It's putting the time in and sort of pushing that process forward. And I think there's thematically so many things you guys have mentioned that are just about doing that, like staying with it and a kind of an attentiveness to improvement. So
for sure. I remember even when I came down to Austin, it was like, I'm going to come down here. I'm going to kind of eat my humble pie, learn as much as I can. After I'm done learning, when I've soaked it all up, I'm out of here. And then I started getting calls for other jobs, and here we are 8 years later, and I'm still here. So I think that's just a testament to like how much I'm able to continue to grow as long as you're in the right place to thrive. Like if you plant the seed in the right place, it'll grow. So I think I just had to find the right place for me. And that's my first 3 years. I was at 3 schools. Like I get bored. I got to go. If I don't feel like I'm growing, I got to go. And that's a conversation Donnie and I have had, reinventing. Like I've had to reinvent myself, and he's helped me reinvent myself multiple times down here. And that's what continues to kind of help me grow. And that's been great. So I appreciate his mentorship in that standpoint.
Yeah, we have a phrase we use around here a lot, which is, and it's always a concern of mine, which is just smart people get bored.
Right, it's true.
And once that happens, you go downward. Like it may happen fast, it may happen slow, but from a leadership perspective, I'd be curious to know, Donnie, your thoughts. Like when you think of Clint or a lot of the other people that have worked with you, like helping them understand. And give them a path to actually get better. Because, a lot of times people see leadership, as you kind of pointed out, as, well, I have these people that work for me, as opposed to giving them a chance to actually blossom and then shine someplace else, even if it's not with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think my thought on that is you kind of, and this is kind of like, this is, again, I'm getting up there in my years of coaching. I can't believe I'm saying that, but like my thought is you kind of go through these stages of your career. I think you got to kind of work yourself out of a job, so to speak. And so I remember this one guy talking about this one time, Skip. I forget the guy's name. I read a lot of my background of a personal faith. So I read I'm involved in our church. I read a lot of different books like that too, from a personal faith. And this one minister pastor, for years, his passion was to build this, I think it was the Crystal Cathedral, I blank on his name. And he spent all these years with this vision to build it. He finally built it, and he was bored and just lost his passion, his motivation was gone. And after a couple of years of him just wallowing, his wife finally got on him and said, look, you need to find a new vision. And so he ended up, this is crazy what I'm going to say, he ended up going and coming up with a plan to raise money and put together this, because what it was, the cathedral would need to be refurbished when he would die, right? His legacy. And so he ends up finding his passion and energy back again because he had a fresh vision for what he could do for that next phase of his life. And I think you see it in coaches a lot. They get to the pinnacle of their career. To your point, they get bored or they just kind of get worn down, but they don't have that next thing, right? And one of my favorite books, if y'all have never read this, it's called Halftime by Bob Buford. And he talks about that in the book. Like the first part of your career is all about success, from your mid-20s to your probably early 40s, mid-40s. It's all about you. It's about your success, your elevation, your promotion, your skills, your salary, your influence. But at some point you peak out, right? The sigmoid curve, you kind of drop, and then you kind of peak out at the top, and you start to come back down again. So somewhere in that on the way up, you've got to figure out, like, what's your next sigmoid? You start that second sigmoid curve, and it drops again, right? So that's somewhere in your your mid-30s to mid-40s, late 40s. You start that second sigmoid curve, and you peak out in the first one around in your 50s, early to mid-50s. You peak out, and it starts to decline late 50s, early 60s. But if you start that second sigmoid curve, it drops, right, in your mid-30s, and it starts climbing up again as that other one starts coming down, if you can see the picture. And that second sigmoid curve is all about significance. Success is about me, but significance is about what I'm going to give back. I had a conversation with a coach recently here at Texas. He's in his mid-50s, and he doesn't know what he's going to do when he's done coaching. And so I started sharing some of these principles, like, dude, you got to have – how are you going to give back when you get up in your mid to late 50s, early 60s? And case in point, Bobby Bowden, that's what he did. He was in his 90s when he died. My good buddy knew him really well. It worked with him at Florida State. And Bobby, when he got into his 60s, 70s, 80s, he gave back still and helped a lot of people. So I think for me, it's about, as you get older, you start thinking about that legacy you're going to leave. Like you're being successful now, but how can I help other people be successful once my times come up? And so that's kind of where my thought process is shifting. How can Clint be a director? How can Ann or Mel or these other guys on our staff, how can they be a director and be the best at what they're doing, whatever that's going to be? And so that's kind of how my thoughts have changed as I've gotten older.
That's great. And I know you got to jump off, D, so we'll get you off here pretty quick. But kind of to wrap up, like, what do you want your legacy? What do you want your mark to be?
Oh, I think it's pretty simple. As a dad, I want to see my girls do way better than I ever did, meaning I want them to have a better start than I did in college. Like, I had a rough start in college, and they're doing it, want to see them. And what I mean by that is I want them to get their degree and then have I've got so many connections now that I'm older, and I'm already starting to help them with connections, help them open up doors for them they couldn't open for themselves, right? So give them things that my dad could never give me. So as a dad, I want to do that. I think as a husband, I want my wife to really enjoy these years when the kids are, we're going to be empty nesters here in a couple of years. And I want her to really enjoy that season of her life because she's earned it. And so for her to do that, I need to be really damn good at what I do and make a good money so she can enjoy that season because she's given up so much for us. So that's my heart for her. My job, my legacy as a coach, I see myself moving up into more administration and just hopefully paying people and putting people in positions and giving them the value and the worth that they deserve, and to make a difference in this career that maybe I couldn't have made, 15, 20 years ago. So that's hopefully I can leave that legacy and impact as I get older. So we'll see. Well,
that's awesome.
You're well on your way.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome to hear. I know you got to bounce, D. Like, it's been a pleasure. Appreciate you hopping on the podcast.
Thanks very much for coming on, Donnie.
Always, my pleasure.
Talking to you.
Great conversation, and obviously, Clint, I work with you and got nothing but love for you. But Skip, appreciate you and all EliteForm's doing for UT, because you helping us get better too, baby. So much love. We're honored to be a small part of it. So we'll do round two sometime.
That'll have to be part two. We'll get in all of that.
Hey, thank you guys. It's been an honor and privilege. Thank you.
All right. Appreciate you both.
Appreciate y'all.